Hello to everybody almost.
ओके।
We are very happy to welcome you all for the eighth session of IYCF clinics at MAH BPNI. And we are very happy to note that there is a wider participation now in this particular meeting. हम ये चाहते हैं कि ये मीटिंग सिंपल हो, ऐसी भाषा में हो जो ग्रास रूट के लोग भी समझ सके, नॉट अप राइट अप टू द ग्रास रूट बट समवॉट नियर ग्रास रूट्स। और मेडिकल कॉलेज के जो स्पेशलिस्ट है, पीडियाट्रिशियंस है, नियोनेटोलॉजिस्ट है, लैक्टेशन कंसर्न, ये भी समझ पाए। बट हर एक टाइम ये पॉसिबल नहीं होता है कि हम लोग हर एक लेक्चर हिंदी में और इंग्लिश में मिक्स करके लेंगे। तो आज का टॉपिक भी ऐसा ही है कि डिफ़िकल्ट है शायद हिंदी में प्रेजेंट करना, बट स्टिल आवर स्पीकर्स विल ट्राई टू स्पीक स्लो एंड दे विल ट्राई टू की बात करेंगे, आस्ते बात करेंगे, सिंपल इंग्लिश में बात करेंगे। टॉपिक कहो तो बहुत इंपॉर्टेंट है, नहीं कहो तो बिल्कुल इंपॉर्टेंट नहीं है। आईबीसीएलसी की एग्जाम की बात करो तो ज़रूर इसमें से एक या दो क्वेश्चंस इसके ऊपर आ सकते हैं। मैं जब भी यूएसए में गया था कोई कॉन्फ्रेंस के लिए, तभी मैंने सुना कि सैंडियागो जो शहर है यूएसए का, वहाँ पे इस प्रकार की काउंसलिंग की बहुत ज़्यादा ज़रूरत पड़ती है। हमें स्पीकर्स इसके ऊपर ही हमें शायद हाईलाइट करेंगे। तो बिना समय वेस्ट किए मैं डॉक्टर सुषमा मलिक को रिक्वेस्ट करता हूँ कि टू टेक ओवर द मीटिंग and introduce our speakers and start the session. Thank you.
Thank you, Prashant. At the outset, I want to thank everybody और बहुत बहुत शुक्रिया सभी को जिन्होंने इस आज फोरम में हमारे साथ ज्वाइन किया है। कोशिश है कि थोड़ी हिंदी में भी बात की जाए, लेकिन फिर भी हम सब लोगों को इतनी आदत हो गई है इंग्लिश की कि हमें थोड़ी परेशानी सी होने लग गई है अब हिंदी में बात करने के लिए। लेकिन जैसे प्रशांत ने कहा कि कुछ ऐसे टॉपिक्स हैं जहाँ पे हमें हिंदी और इंग्लिश हम मिक्स करके बोलते हैं। हमारी कोशिश रहेगी कि जितना हम समझा सकें, बता सकें, हम इंग्लिश और हिंदी दोनों मिक्स करके बात करेंगे। तो सबसे पहले शुक्रिया टू बीपीएनआई महाराष्ट्र, टू यूनिसेफ महाराष्ट्र एंड ब्यूरो ऑफ न्यूट्रिशन मैनेजमेंट, जो जिन्होंने हमें इतनी मदद दी है कि हम ये आईवाईसीएफ क्लिनिक्स जो हैं, दूर तक हम सबको ये सुनने का एक मौका, एक सीखने का, इकट्ठे सीखने का, ना कि एक तरफा बट दोनों तरफा एक लर्निंग प्लेटफॉर्म सा जो बन गया है। और इसमें हम
न्यूट्रिशन
बहुत
ब्यूरो
इम्पोर्टेंट
न्यूट्रिशन
चीज,
ब्यूरो ऑल्सो मलिक मैडम
हाँ मैंने बताया है,
बताया। हाँ
ब्यूरो
हाँ।
ऑफ न्यूट्रिशन
हम्म।
महाराष्ट्र। तो एक ये लर्निंग जो है दो तरफा है, और ऐसे इम्पोर्टेंट टॉपिक्स पे हम लोग डिस्कस करते हैं जो हम इकट्ठे सीखते हैं, दोनों तरफ की जो है हमारी द एक्सपीरियंसेस फ्रॉम बोथ साइड्स। सो आज का जो टॉपिक है बहुत हट के टॉपिक है, और मुझे लगता है कि ये बहुत ही एक जरूरी टॉपिक है जो आज शायद हमें इसकी इतनी रेलेवेंस ना पता लगे, बट वी आर कमिंग अक्रॉस सच केसेस। एंड ये बहुत जरूरी है कि पहले हमें इसके बारे में थोड़ा तो पता हो, और ऐसे पेरेंट्स को हम कैसे हेल्प करेंगे। तो आज का टॉपिक है सपोर्टिंग ब्रेस्ट फीडिंग एंड इन्फेंट न्यूट्रिशन इन LGBTQI फैमिलीज। और ये केस बेस्ड अप्रोच हमने लिया है ताकि इजी अंडरस्टैंडिंग हो। तो जो हर एक फैमिली है, जब वो हमें अप्रोच करती, कोई भी हम डॉक्टर के पास जाते हैं तो हम चाहते हैं कि वो हमें सपोर्ट करे, हमारी बात सुने, और ना कि हमारी जैसे हमारे पर हंसे या कुछ भी। तो एवरीबडी वांट्स दैट रेस्पेक्ट, दैट एवरीबडी वांट्स द इक्विटेबल केयर। चाहे वो गरीब हो, अमीर हो, चाहे वो गुजराती हो, चाहे पंजाबी हो, चाहे वो अफ्रीकन अमेरिकन किधर से भी हो, सबके लिए हमें एक इक्वल नजरिया से देखना है, इसलिए इक्विटेबल होना चाहिए। सबको हमें रिस्पेक्ट से देखना है, और सबको हमें हेल्प करने और अफर्म करने की बहुत ज्यादा जरूरत है। तो ऐसी जो फैमिलीज हैं, जो LGBTQI फैमिलीज हैं, उनकी क्या परेशानियां हैं, और किस तरह हम, सबसे पहले हमें अपना नजरिया बदलना है कि हम ऐसी फैमिलीज को पूरा हेल्प करेंगे। इनके क्या चैलेंजेस हैं, ये क्यों नहीं रिकग्नाइज हो रहे हैं, क्यों ये डरते हैं हमें अप्रोच भी करने के लिए? क्या हमारे जो सिक्योरिटी वाले हैं हॉस्पिटल गेट्स बंद कर देते हैं इन लोगों के लिए? हम सब प्रिज्यूम करते हैं कि ये तो हमें परेशान करने वाले हैं, पर ये सब हमें बैरियर्स दूर करने हैं। वी हैव टू गिव दैट कॉन्फिडेंस टू आवर पेरेंट्स, और इनको फीडिंग आउटकम्स के लिए और इन्फेंट फीडिंग और ब्रेस्ट फीडिंग के लिए बहुत ज्यादा सपोर्ट करना है। ये एक सिर्फ स्पेशल केयर नहीं है, लेकिन हमें अपना नजरिया, जैसे कहते हैं कि पूरा हमें एक नजरिया अपना बदलना है, वाइडन आवर ओन लेंस, टू हेल्प सच पेरेंट्स। हाउ वी विल हेल्प देम फॉर ईदर ब्रेस्ट फीडिंग, चेस्ट फीडिंग, चाहे हमें इंड्यूस लैक्टेशन करना पड़े, चाहे हमें डोनर मिल्क देना पड़े, और हो सकता है कई बार हमें फॉर्मूला फीडिंग भी देना पड़े, हमें इनको पूरा सपोर्ट करना है। और आज के दिन दो माहिर लैक्टेशन कंसल्टेंट्स, डॉक्टर मनीषा गोगरे एंड डॉक्टर रिद्धि चंद्राना, आज बात करेंगे, हमें समझाएंगे कि कैसे इन्होंने ये केसेस के साथ डील किया, और कैसे क्या है इनकी इंट्रिकेसीज, या किस तरह हम इकट्ठा इनको हेल्प कर सकते हैं। तो Dr. Manisha Gogri, not only a lactation consultant in her practice since 2009, but she's also worked as a lactation consultant at Seven Hills and continues to work at Hiranandani Hospital. She runs a lactation clinic fit for birth, and she's been the past secretary of BPNI Maharashtra. She's also been an NB Kumta awardee, and she's an internationally certified childbirth educator. और इसका क्या और कहा जाए कि मनीषा की जो कंपनी है, वो, उसकी वजह से हम बहुत बहुत शुक्रिया करते हैं आरती फाउंडेशन को, जिसकी वजह से हमारी मदर सपोर्ट ग्रुप लीडर्स और कंसल्टेंट्स एंड लैक्टेशन कंसल्टेंट्स आर बीइंग सपोर्टिंग हमारे बॉम्बे के वेरियस टर्शरी हॉस्पिटल्स तो जरूर, बट मैटरनिटी होम्स, और इससे हम लोग इतने मदर बेबी डायड्स को अप्रोच कर रहे हैं। तो थैंक यू टू मनीषा एंड टू आरती। और आज की जो दूसरी स्पीकर हैं, अ वेल नोन स्पीकर, रिद्धि चंद्राना, जो कि खुद भी एक IBCLC और लैक्टेशन कंसल्टेंट हैं, including that she is a Lamaze certified childbirth educator, and she is working as a lactation consultant at Jupiter Hospital, Kaushalya Hospital, and at Kim's Hospital, Thane. She also runs the lactation and infant nutrition program called as NutriKids. Without much delay, और ज्यादा देरी नहीं करना चाहूंगी, हम बेसब्री से आपके कुछ शब्द सुनना चाहते हैं। ओवर टू बोथ ऑफ योर।
Thank you, Dr. Sushma. Thank you so much for the introduction. Good afternoon, everyone. The topic of my presentation today is supporting breastfeeding and infant nutrition in LGBTQ plus families. It's a case-based approach that we're looking at. The reason I chose this as my topic today is because learning never really stops for all of us, and sometimes our patients bring us into situations we ourselves may have never thought of before. So, this case challenged me, it taught me, and at the same time, it gave me a lot of perspective on how inclusive and creative breastfeeding support can be. So, the goal of today's session is to help you see that lactation is possible in LGBTQ families too. Many of us may not even have seen such cases yet, but with the modern family settings that we are all coming across in and around us, we will start seeing them more often. Sometimes you may have even come across them without realizing the emotional struggles that these parents carry. So through these two cases that I have with me, I want to show you the both the science and the emotions that has gone behind such journeys. So let's understand some terms that you are going to hear in the session before we go ahead talking about the case. So first is the lesbian. It's a sexual orientation that describes a woman who is emotionally and sexually attracted to other women. Gay, it's a sexual orientation that describes a person who is emotionally and sexually attracted to people of their own gender. Usually it is it can be used regardless of gender identity, but it is more commonly used to describe men. Bisexual is it's a sexual orientation that describes a person who is emotionally and sexually attracted to people of their own gender and people of other genders as well. Tandem lactation or co-lactation, it usually means two people breastfeeding at the same time. So classically, it is used when one mother breastfeeds a newborn and an older child. But here in my case, it is applied as two mothers are going to are lactating for the same baby. So both the mothers are lactating and sharing breastfeeding responsibilities for the same infant. Induced lactation, that is establishing milk production in someone who has not been pregnant recently. So these are the kind of terms you might hear. So this was just a reflection to that. So introducing my case to you, here the case has two mothers and one baby. So let me give you a little history of this case as to, so this family was referred to me by a gynecologist. All I was told on the phone call was that I'm sending you a family with concerns about lactation. There were no more details shared with me. Now, when the family walked in my clinic, I saw two women and one man. And one of the women, let's call her Mother A for now. So she started speaking. She said, I and this male partner, we want to have a baby, but we are not going to get pregnant like everyone does. And we are not going to have sex with each other. We are planned to use the egg from the fellow woman in the room, which was the mother bee. So let's call her Mother B for now, and the sperm from the male partner. So at that moment, not knowing how to respond, and because it was my first such case, so I asked, why do you even want to go for this kind of a setting? So that's when something significant happened. Mother A took a pause and then she told me, probably you're the first one to know this, but we want you to know because we are lesbians, we are partners, and we want to have a baby. And I realized that I was the first medical professional to whom they disclosed their identity. Think about that, the courage it takes for a family to come to a medical space where they fear judgment and then they open up completely. So, what struck me even more was this: their primary intention to come to me was not about pregnancy. They had once witnessed a water birth while on a vacation. They saw a baby do the breast crawl, the latch on, the feed at the mother's breast, the way the baby would calm down when the mother would take her on the breast. That visual experience had moved them deeply. So they wanted to experience that same beauty with their own baby. And they had read, when before they came to me, they had already read a lot about breastfeeding. They were quite motivated to nurture their own child through lactation. Now that's where they were referred to me. Now this was of course new for me. I did not even know the right words at that moment, and somehow I realized it that my first question to them wasn't perfect. But that's the truth of real practice. Sometimes we don't know how to respond and we learn as we go. But what mattered was I did not dismiss them. I listened, I respected their wish, and I supported them by sending them back to the gynecologist for the medical steps of conception. Now, what happened there was they went ahead with IVF, where with the egg from the mother bee and sperm from the male partner, they conceived it. So, to give you a little history of the mothers, both the mothers is Mother A. Now, I'm going to call her the birth mother. She had PCOS, and but she was under treatment for some time. The mother B, the one who gave her egg for the embryo, I'm going to call her the genetic mother. So she also had a very significant history. Years ago, as a teenager, she had been through a traumatic rape and she had conceived at that time. But later, she terminated the pregnancy at 17 weeks. Understandably, this had left her with a lot of emotional scars. But now, with the love and stability of her partner, she was ready to nurture a child, not just emotionally, but also biologically if there was a way. Now, in India, there are a lot of legal and cultural hurdles for people like this. So, for an IVF to be possible, they had to navigate through a lot of rules around marital status. So, for a brief period, the birth mother got married to the male partner whom they had found in their own LGBT community, and how that's how the IVF protocol moved forward. Now, eventually, the embryo from the genetic mother was implanted in the birth mother, and the pregnancy was achieved. So here I was in the middle of their journey with a family that was deeply motivated, a gynecologist who was equally curious and cautious, and a situation that was not just new for them, but honestly also new for me. And this was my first encounter with an LGBTQ family in my professional role. So, what it taught me was families come in many forms. The need for support is supposed to be universal. As professionals, our words, our body language, they matter a lot. One moment of judgment could have probably closed the door forever, but a moment of acceptance helped them to build that lifelong trust on me. So now here's where the story takes an even more powerful turn. Once conceived, this couple came back to me again for antenatal lactation counseling. Now, the birth mother and the genetic mother, they both came along with the father. Now, this is when the couple asked me, is it possible for both of us to breastfeed our child? Now, I'll be honest, this was new for me. Induced lactation is rare, and counseling two mothers was something I had not done before. So I had to remind myself that I didn't have to be like my role was to be non-judgmental, to balance the science and empathy, and to believe in their wish before I could ask them to believe in the process. And inside I felt very nervous because would I be able to support them correctly? But I also was, quite inspired by their determination. So my first step was to explain what induced lactation means, that with the right kind of stimulation, sometimes medication, milk production can be triggered. We did speak at length about what kind of realistic expectations they should keep, because it may or may not result in full supply, and even drops of milk could be valuable. The importance of skin to skin, suckling, pumping, this is all what we discussed. There was a lot of emotional readiness because this journey required a lot of patience. I also acknowledged that their unique situation was not just about milk, it was about the mothers sharing the bond of nurturing their child. What struck me most were their emotions behind it. So, the genetic mother who had lived the trauma of her past pregnancy through a rape, when she wanted to nurture her child, it was breastfeeding was symbolizing healing. It was a way to reclaim her body and to create that positive, loving connection with her baby. And what she told me was, if I can nurse this baby, Dr. Riddhi, even a little, it will heal something inside me. And for the birth mother, she was like, I want both of us to be mothers in the fullest sense, and to carry and to feed. So their motivation was not just medical alone, it was a lot of love, healing, and equality in parenthood. And this is where the concept of induced lactation came into the picture. Something that could give the genetic mother, uh, you know, a chance to rewrite her reproductive history and eventually have a better experience. And of course, the idea for induced lactation for the birth mother was very reassuring. She felt happy that her partner could also share it, the breastfeeding journey for her. But the question, of course, was how possible is it? Is it even possible? So, of course, there are a lot of intricacies into this. Um, my counseling sessions were more about not giving them those false reassurances, but validating their emotions, fears, doubts, educating them with the physiology of that, the role of the hormones, and making sure that both mothers, they don't take it as a they take themselves as a team, not in a competition, because one was giving her body to grow the baby and the other was preparing for her body to nourish the baby. So the gynecologist was also brought into discussions. Interestingly, too was surprised. She admitted that this was probably her first time that she was managing such a case. But together, we created a plan, and the counseling sessions now were not just about biology. They were a lot about healing as well. So holding that safe space is where eventually we tried to make it work. So this was their exact setting. Let's talk about what induced lactation protocol we practiced as well. But what we need to know is in surrogacy and LGBTQ families, breastfeeding may not follow the usual path. So its breastfeeding is also more about bonding as much as nutrition is. Now, Dr. Manisha Gogri will share some key steps that we used in induced lactation for this case. So Dr. Manisha Gogri, handing over to you.
Yes. Okay. So this is where I came into the picture because Riddhi had called me to seek my advice about this case. अब इंड्यूस्ड लैक्टेशन के केसेस मैंने तब तक काफी सारे किए हुए थे। आज की तारीख तक अगर गिनेंगे तो एनीवेयर बिटवीन 100 and 150 केसेस ऑफ इंड्यूस्ड लैक्टेशन, बट दे वर ऑलवेज इन हेटेरोसेक्सुअल फैमिलीज, मतलब रेगुलर मैरिड कपल में जो इंड्यूस लैक्टेशन हम करते हैं। तो आई डोंट नो कि आप सब लोग इंड्यूस लैक्टेशन के बारे में कितना जानते हैं, बट जनरली जब मैं देखती हूँ इवन हेल्थ केयर प्रोफेशनल्स में इस सब्जेक्ट के बारे में काफी इग्नोरेंस है। आज भी कभी कहीं मैं किसी गैदरिंग में जाती हूँ और मैं उनको बताती हूँ कि मैं ये काम करती हूँ, तो डॉक्टर्स भी पूछते हैं कि अरे ऐसा हो सकता है क्या। तो इसके बारे में जानकारी नहीं है। इंड्यूस लैक्टेशन का मतलब क्या है कि प्रोड्यूसिंग मिल्क विदाउट प्रेगनेंसी, विच मीन्स व्हाट, ब्रेस्ट फीडिंग विदाउट बर्थिंग, या प्रेग्नेंट हुए बिना मिल्क प्रोडक्शन जनरेट करना। तो जनरली कौन से टाइप के केसेस हमारे पास आते हैं इंड्यूस लैक्टेशन के लिए, कि जो कपल है, पेरेंट्स हैं जो बच्चा अडॉप्ट करना चाहते हैं और उनको कहीं से पता चलता है कि इस अडॉप्टेड बच्चे को भी अगर हम फीड कर सके तो कितना अच्छा, तो देन दे फाइंड अस एंड दे कम टू अस कि हमको भी हमारे बच्चे को, अडॉप्टेड बेबी को ब्रेस्ट फीड करना है। या कई बार पेरेंट्स जो सरोगसी से बच्चा पैदा करते हैं, तो ऐसे बच्चे को भी वो मदर जो है वो ब्रेस्ट फीड करना चाहती है। और इस केस में हमें जो देखा कि पार्टनर ऑफ द जेस्टेशनल पेरेंट, मतलब एक पेरेंट बर्थिंग पेरेंट है और दूसरा जो पेरेंट है वो भी ब्रेस्ट फीड करना चाहता है, तो ऐसे केसेस में हमको इंड्यूस लैक्टेशन करना होता है। अभी जब हम मेडिसिन प्रिस्क्राइब करते हैं तो वो सिर्फ डॉक्टर्स या मेडिकल प्रोफेशनल्स कर सकते हैं, लेकिन ज्यादातर हमारे लैक्टेशन सपोर्ट पीपल डॉक्टर्स नहीं है। तो उनका भी एक रोल है क्योंकि इसमें काफी सारा सपोर्ट जरूरी होता है जो नॉन मेडिकल भी है, इसलिए सबको इसके बारे में जानकारी होना जरूरी है। तो इन इस केस में लाइक इंड्यूस्ड लैक्टेशन के टाइम, वी ऑफन थिंक कि व्हाई डू दे वांट टू डू इट, या डॉक्टर्स भी पूछते हैं कि क्यों करना चाहते हो आप इंड्यूस्ड लैक्टेशन, क्यों करना चाहते हो। तो हम जनरली देखते हैं कि अब जानकारी ब्रेस्ट फीडिंग के बेनिफिट्स के बारे में काफी बढ़ गई है। सब लोग जानते हैं हाउ इट इज बेनिफिशियल फॉर द मदर, फॉर द बेबी। तो फॉर द हेल्थ बेनिफिट्स वो ब्रेस्ट फीड करना चाहते हैं, टू प्रोवाइड आइडियल न्यूट्रिशन टू द बेबी। फिर मोस्ट इंपॉर्टेंट रीजन इन सच केसेस कि जहां पे वो मदर ने बर्थ नहीं दिया है लेकिन उसको चाहिए कि उसी तरह का बॉन्डिंग इस बच्चे के साथ मेरा होना चाहिए, तो फॉर नर्चरिंग एंड बॉन्डिंग विथ दिस बेबी शी वांट्स टू इंड्यूस लैक्टेशन। कई बार रिलीजियस रीजंस भी होते हैं कि अडॉप्टेड बच्चा जो है उसको 2 बूंद तो मेरा दूध पिलाना ही चाहिए। सो दोज काइंड ऑफ पीपल ऑल्सो कम टू अस। एंड मेनी अ टाइम्स व्हाट आई हैव रियलाइज्ड इज कि जब वो मदर, उसको हम जब पूरा इंफॉर्मेशन देते हैं और उसको एक होप क्रिएट हो जाती कि हाँ देर इज अ पॉसिबिलिटी कि मैं भी ब्रेस्ट फीड कर सकती हूँ, शी गेट्स सो मच ऑफ अ रिलीफ एंड अ फीलिंग ऑफ कि आई एम एटलीस्ट capable of breastfeeding. If I could not give birth to my baby, at least I can breastfeed my baby. Next slide please. तो इंड्यूस लैक्टेशन का अगर लेक्चर लेने जाए तो इसी तरह का 1 घंटे का एक लंबा लेक्चर हो जाएगा, क्योंकि उसमें काफी सारे इंट्रिकसीज हैं। बट हम सबको एक बेसिक जानकारी होनी चाहिए कि इसमें हम करते क्या हैं। तो फर्स्ट स्टेप जो है वो है कि बॉडी और ब्रेस्ट्स को प्रिपेयर करना मिल्क बनाने के लिए। अब नॉर्मल जो प्रेग्नेंट होती है मदर, उसका बिकॉज ऑफ द हार्मोनल चेंजेस, जो प्रेगनेंसी के हॉर्मोन्स होते हैं उससे जो बॉडी में चेंजेस हो रहे हैं, उससे ब्रेस्ट ग्रोथ भी होती है। ग्लैंड्स, जो मिल्क प्रोड्यूसिंग ग्लैंड्स है ब्रेस्ट में, वो भी साइज में बढ़ते हैं, डक्ट्स का ब्रांचिंग होता है। तो ये जो स्ट्रक्चरल चेंजेस हो रहे हैं प्रेग्नेंट वुमन में, ये आर्टिफिशियली हमको इस मदर में भी क्रिएट करने हैं। सो दैट इज कॉल्ड प्रिपरेशन ऑफ द बॉडी एंड द ब्रेस्ट। सो हाउ डू वी डू इट? तो पहली चीज है कि फिजिकल स्टिम्युलेशन से ये हो सकता है। सो ब्रेस्ट मसाज, निपल स्टिम्युलेशन, मैनुअल एक्सप्रेशन, ऑल दीज आर वेज ऑफ फिजिकल स्टिम्युलेशन। दूसरी बात है कि हम हॉर्मोन्स दे सकते हैं। तो कॉमनली जो हमारे ओरल कॉन्ट्रासेप्टिव पिल्स होते हैं, जिसमें एस्ट्रोजन और प्रोजेस्टेरोन दोनों हॉर्मोन्स होते हैं, तो जनरली ऐसी मेडिसिन का हम इस्तेमाल करते हैं। और तीसरा है कि हर्ब्स। सो देर आर वेरियस हर्ब, शतावरी सबने सुना है। देर आर वेरियस अदर हर्ब्स लाइक गोट्स रू, देर इज मोरिंगा। तो काफी सारे हर्ब्स हैं जो भी इसमें काम आ सकते हैं।
फ्रॉम
अभी
देयर।
इंपॉर्टेंट थिंग है कि समझना ये जरूरी है कि सब, हर एक पेशेंट में हम हर चीज नहीं देते हैं या नहीं दे सकते हैं, क्योंकि काफी सारे मेडिकेशन भी होते हैं। इफ द मदर इज 40 years old एंड अबव, हम सर्टन हॉर्मोन्स नहीं दे सकते हैं। या हमारे पास इतने लेट आते हैं लोग कि हमारे पास टाइम ही नहीं रहता है हॉर्मोन्स देने का। सो एवरी स्टेप इज वेरी फ्लेक्सिबल, एंड मैं जो आपको बता रही हूँ वो ऑप्शंस है, लेकिन हर पेशेंट में हम सारे ऑप्शंस नहीं यूज करते। अभी सेकेंड स्टेप है स्टार्टिंग टू मेक मिल्क बिफोर द बेबी अराइव्स। मीन्स व्हाट? कि बच्चा आने के पहले, अगर अभी सरोगेसी हो रही है तो हमको रफली डेट, ड्यू डेट मालूम है कि बच्चा कब आने वाला है। अडॉप्शन के केसेस में काफी इरेग्युलर हो जाता है क्योंकि डेट शिफ्ट होते रहते हैं, बट काफी टाइम वो भी एक अंदाजा होता है कि अडॉप्टेड बेबी कब मिलने वाला है। तो इस तरह से हम देखते हैं कि जनरली हमारा जो ये प्रोसेस है, वो 6 to 8 weeks बिफोर द बेबी कम्स हमको मिल्क प्रोडक्शन और मिल्क एक्सट्रैक्शन स्टार्ट करना है। तो इसमें हम जनरली हार्मोन स्टॉप करके बाकी सारी ट्रीटमेंट चालू रखते हुए पंपिंग स्टार्ट कर देते हैं। एंड द बेस्ट पंप टू यूज इज अ हॉस्पिटल ग्रेड डबल इलेक्ट्रिक पंप, बट हर जगह अवेलेबल नहीं होता है, तो रेगुलर डबल इलेक्ट्रिक पंप वी कैन यूज। एंड पंपिंग से मदर के ब्रेस्ट को जो स्टिम्युलेशन मिलता है, उससे ड्रॉप्स प्रोड्यूस होने लगते हैं, और ये ड्रॉप्स हम कलेक्ट करके रखना चालू कर देते हैं बिफोर द बेबी अराइव्स। And the third step is actually when the baby comes. So now the baby is with this mother in whom we have done induced lactation. So the best way all of us know to increase the milk supply is ki directly breastfeed. So lot of skin to skin and direct breastfeeding. This is what we practice mainly to increase the production. Medicines चालू रखना पड़ता है यूजुअली, देन हर्ब्स ऑल्सो। एंड कभी कभी अगर बच्चा लैच नहीं कर पा रहा है, प्री मेच्योर है, तो पंपिंग भी चालू रखना पड़ता है। और इसके साथ साथ समटाइम्स वी हैव टू सप्लीमेंट दिस बेबी ऑल्सो, क्योंकि हम जब इनिशियल काउंसलिंग करते हैं तभी, जैसे रिद्धि ने बताया, कि वी डोंट नो द आउटकम ऑफ दिस प्रोसेस। भले हम सब स्टेप्स राइट करें, वी डोंट नो हाउ मच मिल्क दिस बेबी दिस मदर इज गोइंग टू प्रोड्यूस। इसलिए कभी कभी हमको, वी फर्स्ट गिव अ आइडिया ऑल्सो टू द मदर टू कीप हर एक्सपेक्टेशंस इन चेक, कि हाँ वी विल ट्राई आवर बेस्ट फॉर मैक्सिमम मिल्क प्रोडक्शन, बट वी डोंट नो, वी आर नॉट श्योर। एंड मेनी अ टाइम्स वी हैव टू सप्लीमेंट ऑल्सो। तो सप्लीमेंटेशन के भी अलग तरीके होते हैं, जैसे एट ब्रेस्ट सप्लीमेंटेशन, मतलब सप्लीमेंट जो भी देते हैं वो भी हम ब्रेस्ट पे ही ट्यूब के द्वारा, जब बच्चा सकल कर रहा है तब देते हैं। So this is in a nutshell the protocols that commonly are used। and इसका रेफरेंस हम जब शुरुआत में हमने प्रैक्टिस शुरू की इंड्यूस लैक्टेशन की, तब हम न्यूमैन गोल्डफाब प्रोटोकॉल्स फॉलो करते थे, क्योंकि दोज वर द ओनली प्रोटोकॉल्स अवेलेबल। बाद में अब काफी सारे केस स्टडीज और प्रोटोकॉल्स आ चुके हैं। सो दिस 3 step अप्रोच इज बाय समवन कॉल्ड एलिसा श्नेल, जिसने एक बुक लिखी है इसके ऊपर, ब्रेस्ट फीडिंग विदाउट बर्दिंग, वो बुक का नाम है। नेक्स्ट स्लाइड प्लीज। And now you will understand that there are no exact or standardized protocols. Every case is unique. So every case that I have done, अभी currently मेरे treatment में अभी 2 induced lactation के cases है, दोनों काफी different है, very very different. So for each we have to modify our प्रोटोकॉल। तो ऐसा कोई स्टैंडर्ड प्रोटोकॉल हम नहीं फॉलो कर सकते हैं। कई बार हमको स्टेप्स को स्किप करना पड़ता है, जो 3 स्टेप्स मैंने बताए, या शॉर्टन करना पड़ता है। पेरेंट्स भी जो है वो डिफरेंट डिफरेंट डाइवर्स बैकग्राउंड से हमारे पास आते हैं। सो हर एक का एक्सपेक्टेशन ब्रेस्ट इंड्यूस लैक्टेशन के बारे में, ब्रेस्ट फीडिंग के बारे में बहुत अलग होता है। और उनके मेडिकल इश्यूज जनरली, जिसको जो खुद डिलीवर नहीं कर पाया बच्चे को, जनरली काफी सारे मेडिकल इश्यूज इन्वॉल्व हैं। इनफर्टिलिटी का हिस्ट्री है, फिर उनका फैमिली और सोशल सर्कमस्टेंसेस भी हमको देखना पड़ता है कि वो कैसे ये प्रोटोकॉल्स फॉलो करेगी, या वो पंपिंग कर सकती है क्या, सोसाइटी इसको किस नजरिए से देखती है, उसकी फैमिली कैसे देखती है। एंड बच्चे का अराइवल का टाइमिंग, उससे हमको पता चलता है कि मेरे पास कितना टाइम है, बिकॉज पेरेंट्स डोंट कम टू अस 9 मंथ्स अगो, करेक्ट। आई मीन इट वुड बी मोस्ट आइडियल कि जैसे नॉर्मल ब्रेस्ट डेवलपमेंट को 9 मंथ्स लगते हैं, तो उसी तरह से मेरे पास भी 9 मंथ्स हो इंड्यूस करने को। बट वैसा कभी नहीं होता है, क्योंकि पेरेंट्स आते हैं कि अभी हमारा बच्चा अगले महीने आने वाला है, तो आप हमको लैक्टेशन इंड्यूस करके दो। So we don't know the timeline. So our entire protocol will change based on the timelines. And the lactation support team, like how Riddhi said, that the gynecologist, the lactation counselor, the pediatrician, all of them have to come together and develop an induced lactation protocol which is flexible, क्योंकि हर स्टेप में भी चेंजेस हमको तभी के तभी करना पड़ता है। सो फ्लेक्सिबल रहना और उसको कस्टमाइज करते जाना वो फैमिली के नीड्स के हिसाब से। तो इस तरह से हम इंड्यूस लैक्टेशन का प्रोटोकॉल करते हैं। ओवर टू यू रिद्धि। रिद्धि विल एक्सप्लेन नाउ इस पर्टिकुलर केस में उसने कैसे ये प्रोटोकॉल हैंडल किया।
Thank you, Dr. Manisha. So, coming back to the case, I will tell you how induced lactation was initiated in this case. So, firstly, at 27 weeks of pregnancy, we initiated the induced lactation protocol for the genetic mother. So, the gynecologist had prescribed domperidone to increase the levels. On the sixth day, we started pumping, but in the first few sessions, nothing came out, which was sort of expected. But for the genetic mother, it felt like a failure. So after 2 weeks, she was exhausted and frustrated. And I remember her words. She told me, I don't think I can do this. Maybe my body wasn't meant for this. So, of course, this was a crucial turning point. And so in a team with the gynecologist, when I spoke to the gynecologist, we highlighted that without adequate breast preparation, might be the milk output may remain low. So the decision was to, to start her on Lactair, and that is where things changed. On day one, she expressed about just 2 ml. By day three, she already started producing 30 ml per day, and over the next few weeks, her supply steadily climbed. So by 35 weeks of gestation, when the mother had to deliver the baby, because of low amniotic fluid being only 1.99, the genetic mother had reached of around 300 ml of expression of milk per day. So this progress wasn't just due to medications, it was a result of a lot of relentless effort. There were strict pumping schedules with a hospital graded double electric pump. There was use of Lactair and Shatavari. There was a lot of constant reassurance and counseling going on between all of us. For me, it was incredible to watch, because what started as a doubt in me and a fear in her, it slowly transformed into confidence and joy. So the genetic mother began to believe that yes, my body can do this, and this is what she told me after a few weeks in, when she started seeing the milk, and she was happy that she could feed her baby. So again, it wasn't about milk, it was about identity, it was about shared motherhood. And by the time of delivery, both mothers were fully prepared, one with her body and the other one with the milk. So again, let's go into some postpartum, what kind of changes we saw over there. So when the baby was born at 35 weeks and 4 days, he was immediately shifted to the NICU for observation. Now, this was a huge emotional setback for the couple. Imagine the story that they had seen in the vacation, that they could probably take the baby and directly take the baby for the breast crawl. Instead of that, this baby, because the baby was born preterm, this baby was shifted immediately to the NICU. So it was a huge emotional setback for the couple. And but none of this, they had ever expected. So the both the mothers, they felt helpless and anxious. For the birth mother who had gone through the pregnancy, there was a sense of guilt for her. Was it because of me that the baby was born early? And for the genetic mother, there was frustration because she had worked so hard to induce lactation, but she wasn't even able to put the baby right away to the breast. So and for the father, it was fear about the baby's health, fear about how to support both the partners at once. So again, this is where our counseling becomes extremely crucial. Of course, I reminded them that NICU admission was not a failure, it was just a safety measure for the baby. And even if skin to skin and breast crawl isn't happening on day one, their baby could still build the bond on eventually once the baby was back. So the fact that expressed breast milk was ready from both the mothers meant that their baby was receiving the best nutrition right from day one, despite the NICU stay. So, which is what, sort of had a positive ray of hope. On day two, the baby stabilized and we were able to initiate breastfeeding. Birth mother could finally put the baby to the breast. At the same time, the genetic mother expressed the milk continued to be a part of the feeding plan, which reassured her that her effort was valuable. But just as the family began to relax, there was something else which was available. So let's first go to the lactation journey that happened. So, like I said, in the first few days, besides the other things that went on, the baby had a poor latch. We also had to start the birth mother on domperidone. Then the gynecologist followed it by adding perinom on day three. And then she had very full breasts, but the release of milk wasn't there, which is why she was given sublingual pitocin on day four. Now, this is a usual practice from that gynecologist. She does that routinely for a lot of patients from her side. Now, eventually, by day five, the baby had a poor suck, a weak cry, and hypotonia. So this is where the pediatrician was brought in, and after evaluation, the baby was diagnosed with congenital myopathy. Now this diagnosis was devastating for the family. The immediate reaction was shock and grief and fear for the future. They questioned if the baby will survive. Will he ever feed normally? Now, of course, my in our counseling, my role now shifted from being a lactation consultant alone to an emotional anchor as well. So, of course, I normalized their emotions. Their feeling of grief and anxiety were, of course, very valid. But I reinforced that breastfeeding was still possible, though it might a little look different and take more patience from us. But yes, I emphasized that their baby needed their unity to be more source of nutrition for them. So for the father, I highlighted this role that as he is supposed to be one bridging that practical support, holding that space for both the mothers, and actively participating in caregiving. So this period taught us that lactation counseling is never only about milk transfer, it's about nurturing that resilience in the families. By day seven, the mother was breastfeeding in a laid back position because the baby used to have a lot of breathlessness and offering a lot of skin to skin contact after the feeding was done. At 2 weeks, the baby hadn't regained the birth weight as per the expectation. So it was a very discouraging moment because everything was new for these parents. So here is where we guided them on structured expression, pumping schedules, introduce lactate again. So this is very similar to how you would counsel any other mother. But the conversation here was less about, you must breastfeed. It was more about let's just keep your supply going so that the baby can regain the weight. By week three, the supply improved and the baby could sustain better at the breast, and for the first time exclusive breastfeeding was possible. And my role here was to shift that tone, from that crisis counseling, we were celebrating a small real victory that we had seen. So till now, what we've talked is the genetic mother was quite hesitant to breastfeed directly. So, however, in the journey of the feeding, genetic mother too directly started participating in the journey. Let's get to know how. So, as weeks passed by, the counseling journey kept changing. At 6 to 8 weeks, when the baby's suck weakened again, which was expected, it was the expressed milk from the genetic mother that was carried them through. So this was a chance to remind the family that every effort that was made earlier is now protecting the baby today. Now, at 4 to 5 months and 7 months, the weight gains was steady. The solids began around 6 months, and we shifted the counseling from food diversity and balance. So, what happened at 7 months was there was a new challenge. The birth mother periods returned, and she experienced a supply dip. And this is where she was distressed. She was worried that she might fail again. And the genetic mother, who all along she was wanting to breastfeed, but because she carried that deep trauma in herself, she was always hesitant. So this is where again my counseling became less clinical and more emotional. This is what I told her. This is your chance, not just for milk, but for healing. Let's breastfeed. So, slowly, with a lot of reassurance and a stepwise guidance, she started breastfeeding. One day, she told me, I feel healed. And this was the power of this journey. By 12 months, the baby was thriving, 9.2 kgs, taking 3 meals, snack, breast milk. More importantly, the family celebrated 1 full year of parenthood and breastfeeding together. So, this timeline is not just about supply or growth charts. It's about how counseling shifts across phases, sometimes practical, sometimes medical, sometimes purely emotional. But my role was to walk with them at every stage. Now, of course, this case has taught me a lot. Probably it's taught all of you all a lot. One is that we all come with our own biases towards the LGBT community, towards what family looks like, sometimes even towards the child. And it's important to acknowledge those biases, but consciously even set them aside when we work in such kind of sensitive settings. The truth is, heterosexual and homosexual cases cannot be handled in the same way. The dynamics, the emotional baggage, and the counseling needs are very different. So, in fact, although I have worked with 14 such cases till date, I can honestly say that every single one felt new and challenging. What works in a very typical setting often doesn't work here. The counseling that I would use for a heterosexual couple had to be kept aside completely. I had to sort of develop individualized case specific strategies. And let me tell you, Dr. Manisha Gogri has been that support to me to make me understand how can this sort of change, because even for that matter, even I would question sometimes in my mind as to why is this couple planning this. And this is where I had to keep my understanding of that case aside, and she would sort of tell me that, let's look at this case as a more bias free case. So there's one thing I want you to take one message away is breastfeeding journeys are never one size fits all, especially in a case like this where emotions, relationships, the lived experience that matters is just as much as the milk supply or the feeding technique or the posture would matter. We might remember to keep our own biases aside. Every family deserves dignity, it deserves respect, like Dr. Sushma said in the start, and a chance to be supported in their own unique way. So it's not about giving the textbook answers. Just listen to them, adapt sensitively, and guide with empathy. So this was what learned. This was something that I learned in this case. I'll just briefly also explain you another story. This looks very different from the previous case, yet it taught me equally powerful lessons. So here we had a family of three parents. There was a father one, a 28-year-old bisexual man, married to a woman, but also in a relationship with another man. So that is the father two. So this journey began with a heartbreak, a miscarriage at 8 weeks. So this couple, father one and mother, they were married. They had sexual relations, conceived a pregnancy, but eventually they had a miscarriage at 8 weeks. When they moved towards IUI, father one openly shared about his male partnership to us as their medical team. And till then, they had not disclosed this to us. They were living in this setting since many months now, but that did not come to us before. After evaluation, it was father two sperm that was used, and soon the mother conceived. Pregnancy was largely smooth, just like a regular pregnancy would go. At 39 weeks, she went into labor. She delivered a healthy baby boy vaginally. that's where the story took a shape. At some point in time, as a physiological jaundice takes place in a lot of babies, this baby also went to the NICU. But after the baby came back, is where the father stepped in. They did a lot of skin to skin. They comforted, they stayed present while the mother was continuously round the clock feeding. Now, if you see at this case is a very similar case as what you would see in your own regular setting. But what was odd, extraordinary is when you look at it from the outset. So, what was my role as a lactation counselor there? During pregnancy, because they had already shared this story with me when they conceived, I explained to all the three parents how lactation works, what to expect, how each partner could be involved, especially the fathers, with skin to skin, emotional bonding, practical feeding tips, affirming that both the fathers could still meaningfully bond through touch, through skin to skin, and responsive caregiving, not only through the genetic link. Immediately postpartum, mother was counseled like the way I would counsel any other mother that I would see in my OPD or an IPD. But I encourage the fathers to practice kangaroo care so that the baby could get continuous warmth and regulation to guide without assuming. Because we don't always get cases in a packaged typical family boxes. We can get something which is a little extraordinary where we keep our judgments aside. So this is how this case also sort of taught me that family structures could be diverse. My counseling had to be non-judgmental. When they underwent the miscarriage and the sperm analysis happened and the partner shared with me, this was the turning point for them because they had to build that trust and faith in me to tell me that this is the kind of setting, or tell us as the medical team that this is the kind of setting that we are going to go through. So it did show me that families may look different, but our journey with them is that we have to support them in whatever place they are at. So at as I close, I want to tie both these cases together. What these stories taught me is that every family, whether it's two mothers, two fathers, a more traditional structure, it will get its own unique challenges, a lot of emotional journeys as well. As a person myself also, we y'all we whoever we see, we also develop through our own emotional developments over there. And our role as a lactation counselor is not just to give that technical guidance of day one breastfeed this much and frequency and adequacy and position and latching, because we also have to go beyond that space where we give that emotional support to them. And biases, of course, are going to exist. I'll give you an example. I was sharing this case with one of my fellow colleague today at the hospital, and uh, that person also asked me that ये क्या क्या होता रहता है, पता नहीं चलता है, क्यों करते हैं ये लोग ऐसे. So so there are so many biases towards the community, towards the parenting roles, and even towards the child. So we are going to very obviously think why would they want to do this, but when we continuously set those aside, the true support is where it begins. So, of course, I regularly discuss my cases with Dr. Manisha, and I want to thank her to guide me for induced lactation and counseling of my first case that has helped me to keep my goals in this journey very intact. At the heart of it all, it's compassion and flexibility that ensures successful outcomes. These families reminded me that breastfeeding is not just a biological process, they are very deeply human journeys. And with 14 such cases of LGBTQ families that I have counseled so far, I can say confidently every new case challenges me, every family rewrites the script, and that is what makes this work so meaningful. So, thank you so much for listening me. If there's any questions that you may have, we are happy to answer them.
Thank you so much, Riddhi and Manisha. A real eye opener where these cases have emphasized, the importance of supporting them universally, accepting them, walking along with them in the journey. And, the compassion and flexibility is the most important thing. And, with loads of healing, empathy, support, everything you've been able to, successfully manage as a team and individually both. Thank you very much. And I think it was a much needed topic. Of course, people can refer to the ABM protocol number 33 of 2020 as a source of information. But the practical things that both Riddhi and Manisha have told cannot be given by any textbooks or anything. It's your experience that matters. And thank you for sharing these intricacies of your experience. Thank you once again. And I open the house for loads of. I see that there have been so many accolades for both of you, and you can always see them later, right from wonderful session to giving us such unique cases, etc. However, I see some hands are up, and the first one that I see is Dr. Kesavalu. Yes, sir.
Sir, at the outset, congratulations, Dr. Riddhi and Dr. Manisha Gogri. What a great, really, 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 really. I'm wondering how you have done. So I have to sincerely thank MBPNI team for giving me an opportunity to be part of this Zoom meeting. And Dr. Riddhi, see, you have admitted these babies, right?
Sorry,
Hello?
I didn't get you.
Hello? Hello? They were in admission, right?
Yes.
Hello?
Yes, yes,
Yeah.
yes.
Which is the hospital? Which hospital?
Say privacy issues cannot be.
I'm not able to disclose that for
Sorry. I'm sorry.
problem.
So, because we have to thank the people who have supported you in the hospital.
Yes,
That
sir.
is more important, you know.
Yes, sir,
So
definitely.
great. So, hearty congratulations. I don't know how to thank you also. And
Thank
I
you.
have to sincerely thank Dr. Prashant Gangal, Sushma Malik Madam, and for opening our eyes, you know. Say, normal biological mother, they struggle to breastfeed. How you have struggled to, take breastfeed from a mother, you know, who has not become pregnant also. Great. Once again, sincere
Really,
thanks.
one doubt I had was that was it a natural delivery at 35 in the first case, or was it planned cesarean section?
No, it was a natural birth, but she delivered earlier.
Okay, so it's not something which is planned in that 35
Oh,
weeks.
no.
Okay,
She had a episode of poor movements, and then she
okay,
was given arginine for that for a week, but that
uh,
didn't sustain. Then her
okay,
amniotic fluid dropped, so she was induced, and then she delivered vaginally
okay.
at 35 weeks, 4 days.
Dr. Amrita has raised her hand. Please keep yourselves muted, except the one asking the question. Yes. Yes,
Hello.
Amrita.
Yeah, Dr. Riddhi and Dr. Manisha ma'am. Although I could attend it only partially, but I'm very, very sure that it was a wonderful, informative, and a very novel concept presentation. My query to you, Dr. Riddhi, is that initially when a unique family like this comes to you for consultation, and then through the journey of pregnancy and lactation, if there, how would you handle the confidentiality issue? If, for example, this family doesn't want to confide with anybody more than the primary gynec, the primary pediatrician, or the primary lactation counselor. They don't want to divulge the detail. Then, how do we handle this confidentiality, especially while they're still in the hospital?
Okay. So, thank you for that question. Actually, now I'll just give you a little few details on this. So, there is a community here in India which manages all these LGBTQ people. So, they have a particular standard protocol to follow if there is a medical doctor coming on board, or the people are connecting with some doctor for a particular situation. So the community head, they come in contact with me. They give me a protocol to follow. There is a contract that we sign that I'm not supposed to reveal the identity and not talk about anything related to who this case relates to. So even right now, when I had to take the case presentation, before that, I had taken the permission that I would be sharing the story, of course, without disclosing the identity. But I have to I have to take a permission from them to speak about this. And this is how we are all in the team who are there catering to these couples over there in the community. They were all under contract with them. So we are not allowed to disclose their identity or talk anything which would reveal who they are, where they are, what are they doing, which part of the world they are, nothing. So that is how that confidentiality is intact. and which is why I could not share very intricate details also. Whatever I knew that was relevant to the case is why I shared that.
True.
That
So many intricacies related to these families would be really unique to that particular family. I mean, each family would differ in those intricate details also. But my question was, for example, the first family,
yeah.
where there were two mothers, and while they're still in the hospital after the delivery, and both these mothers want to now breastfeed. So
Yeah.
apart from the core team of doctors, or maybe a few of the floor nurses, if the family doesn't want to divulge the details to the other staff, how
Okay.
do we safeguard that? That is where I'm a little
So in
curious.
this case, the mother who was expressing the milk, the genetic mother, we had not told her to come to the hospital. She was only sending expressed milk in the initial days. And then when she was visiting the hospital for practicing skin to skin, it was just like, probably I would be breastfeeding and my sister is bonding with the child. So
We
the
encourage
nurses did
other
not
family
know.
members to give
Yeah.
KMC with that. Yeah.
So nurses also did not know that this is the kind of setting that is happening. It was only me, the person, the doctor who was delivering, and the pediatrician who were in confidence, and those are the only people who till today know it.
Dr. Mangalavani, you
Thank you so
wanted to
much.
ask something. Yeah, Vani madam.
Hello. Yeah. Hi, Riddhi. I must congratulate you and Manisha. Beautiful presentation. The way you spoke, the confidence, it is amazing. And I should really congratulate both of you. Riddhi, you are doing nice work. And you are booked already for my next Lactacon next year, presenting on this topic.
Sure.
And I have just one question. Mother A and mother B in case one. Though the mother A is the genetic mother, she had a little trauma, but why she didn't want to become pregnant herself?
So, so this is like sort of a little more history into it. But the mother who got genetic mother whom you're saying, right? The one who gave the egg.
Yes, yes,
So because of the history of rape that she had in her past, which she had conceived the pregnancy that time, and then she had terminated it at 17 weeks.
yes.
So she had that trauma in herself. So she was like, I don't want to have a relation with a male partner and conceive the pregnancy. She was even very hesitant to breastfeed also in the initial start, because there was a lot of bodily like I
Yes.
remember when she had come to my clinic during the antenatal counseling, and I just wanted to examine her breasts to understand. Surprisingly, because it was my first case, I would we do ask them, right, that can I touch you? So I did ask her, can I touch you? But that response from her was not very positive, because the trauma of the rape was still there with her, which is why she did not want to undergo the pregnancy again. She didn't even want, she used to hold the baby and she would do that, but she would not take the baby closer to her breast also. It was only at that need of the hour at 7 months is where we did a lot of counseling to her, and she agreed to this, that because the baby needs it, I have to take it because the supply is genuinely down and we don't have anything else now. So it was just with that past trauma that she had that she did not conceive.
Great. But you are doing great job. Keep
Thank you,
doing.
madam. Thank you.
And it was so entertaining. You can see the number of participants, whole 1 hour, everybody's like, oh, listening to both of you. Nobody has withdrawn from the,
Yes,
it's
they are
amazing.
absolutely glued to it.
Very interesting. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Okay.
Someone
I see one more, Dr. Amol. Please unmute.
This is Dr. Priyam. I'm sorry, that's my husband's ID. Dr. Riddhi, I just had one question. In this entire journey, in the first case, was there ever a situation where either the parents or the pediatrician were at a point where they said that it's better to consider top feeding, considering the neuromotor condition of the child, considering the difficulty with feeding? Was that ever a possibility or a suggestion that came in?
The pediatrician, of course, suggested them because of the congenital myopathy. There was used to be a lot of breathlessness, and initially we thought it is a nasal block. On the first day one and day two, we thought it's a nasal block. Baby had come back from the NICU as well. But eventually, when there was a hypotonia and there's a weak cry, the pediatrician did recommend formula. But because we had this kind of a setting where there was a lot of express breast milk ready for the baby, which is why we did not resort to that. And after that, because there was always this cycle of express breast milk coming in, so right from day one till 1 year of their journey, they have not fed formula at all. Even when the birth mother, she joined work, she used to go 2 times a week to the work, and the rest of the day she used to be at work from home. So those 2 days, the genetic mother would give the pumped milk to the mother, to the baby, if in case it was anytime less also. So that journey was just managed in such a way that no formula was not given at all to the baby.
Ma'am, in the same line, another question that came up to my mind when you said this, while inducing, whatever milk was collected, was it stored or was it discarded?
No, it was stored.
So yeah, I'll answer that question. So when we start inducing lactation before the arrival of the baby, whatever milk we get, we always try to store it. Okay, and that is the whole point of building up that stash, because in an induced lactation scenario, the milk supply doesn't increase like in normal lactation. So maybe the mother will have some milk at birth and she starts breastfeeding her baby, but week 1, week 2, week 3, the way it should increase, no, sometimes we start falling short. It doesn't increase that much. So whatever stash we have built, that is very precious for us, because we have to sometimes use it then.
Yeah.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you so much.
Any more questions? Otherwise, we'll.
There are a few things I would like to say.
Yes, please,
Yeah,
Prashant.
there's some related things, which some of the medical professionals may be aware. But then there are the different aspect of it. In the gender sense of it, the language changes as you address the LGBTQ communities. For example, they won't call it breastfeeding; they will call it chest feeding. Then there is nothing like a mother or a father.
Yeah.
They prefer to use the term like a parent.
Yeah.
So since the governments are recognizing these particular type of individuals, therefore quite a few places now, even the normal people have to write in their curriculum vitae whether they want to be addressed as he or her, she or they,
Yeah.
and most of these LGBTQ families would classify it as would like to be called a they, not he or she. So there are things which have changed over a period of time. Second thing I would like to say is that here what we are discussing is that where the people who are probably genetically in the external organs, internal organ wise, they were normal males or females, but they had a deviant mental approach to sex, and that's why you had gay and you had bisexual and you had the lesbians also. But it doesn't remain as simple as that, because LGBTQ involves some other types of people also. And here
Yes.
we need to understand, when you talk about sexual development or sex, it is talked at different levels. For
Yes.
example, at the most basic level, it starts with karyotype, where it is XX or XY, and there may be some other variants also. So where it may be XX female, but then some part of testosterone producing gene has come into onto her genes. So they can be as fine as the genetic levels, where karyotype she might be a female, but because that whole part of testosterone, dihydrotestosterone axis has come in, she will develop as a male. So it's not just remains at XX or XY. It can be XX, XY, XY, whatever variations we can think of. Like there is something called testicular feminization syndrome, where it's basically a male child with XY chromosome. But this, because there is a lack of receptors for dihydrotestosterone, and this person looks like an exact female. In fact, she is being misinterpreted as the most beautiful female around, but she's not actually a female. So there's something called I want the crowd to understand is there is something called genetic karyotypic sex, Of course, that can be proved by chromosomal analysis as well as by some people who do by bar body, or there are some other new investigations which are come into picture. So at karyotypic level, one sex. Second, sex at the level of external genitalia. Yeah. And then the sex determination at the level of internal genitalia. Then it comes the what type of gonad is it? It's just testes or is it ovary or it is over testes? Yeah. And then if you go to still higher, this is hormonally what this particular person is. And still beyond that, some secondary sexual characteristics like beard or mustache or the breast development. So those parts also are important when in sexual determination. And last, of course, comes mentally what type of, like you might see a girl who has been grown up with boys. So she might have tomboyish appearance and may have those particular attributes and attributes also. So when you talk about sexual determination, you have to specify in such individuals for medical analysis, where from karyotype right up to the mental development. So it's not as simple as we think, because there can be multiple combinations of these particular things, as we are saying. Second comment I would like to add is that when you study intersex, there is no more called intersex. It is called differences of sexual differentiation. You no more called ambiguous genitalia as ambiguous genitalia. They are called atypical genitalia or whatever. So at the start of embryonic life, every embryo is female to start with. So by default, every embryo is destined to become a female. But if there is a Y chromosome in the karyotype, that Y chromosome will induce the formation of testosterone or dihydrotestosterone or whatever the hormones, and the female type of internal genitalia which develop from Mullerian duct system, that will disappear, and the Wolffian system, which is intended to be developing into a male type of pattern, that takes over. The external genitalia, again to start with, are of female type, but under the effect of Y chromosome and hormones, the labia get fused. The labia become rugose, and that is where the testes descend down from the abdomen, and the clitoris enlarges to become a phallus. So, when you try to understand intersex, what you have to understand very clearly that every embryo starts as a female. If it is XX and a supporting karyotype, then that stays as a female and developing the typical external genitalia as well as the internal genitalia with uterus, fallopian tubes, and ovaries. But if there is a hormone which Y chromosome hormone, the testosterone coming into picture, the female genitalia, external genitalia, gradually migrate to the male type of genitalia. Now the problem starts here. If there is a hormonal problem, or if there is a genetic problem, or there is some other problem, then what will happen? Suppose, let's say, no, male XY, starting from the female type, this person may remain under-virilized. So you tend to get males who are under-virilized. There can be another area where though XX as females, they will get male hormones into circulation because of some say, chemical abnormality or inborn error of metabolism, and they will become virilized females. So therefore, the external genitalia may looks like a female also and male also, with little longish clitoris, with some fusion of the labial folds. So the concept is under virilized male or virilized female, and that produces different varieties of intersex. So we at all go to see after this particular talk the different aspects of ambiguous genitalia, or the case of ambiguous genitalia. This particular introduction will come of help to you. Of course, this is not the platform to talk about intersex, but then understanding these few concepts may help you to understand when you actually start development of genitalia in males and females, and how these intersex characters come into picture. Or there can be males who have been castrated, like what used to happen in the olden times, where kings wanted strong males to protect their harem, but at the same time he wanted to be safe, and that is where the males were castrated, and therefore they could not develop the full male characteristics, or they were impotent. Anyway, I'll stop my discussion over here. Yeah, Riddhi?
I think Riddhi wants to
Yeah,
say something.
yeah.
Yeah, Riddhi.
So, sir, in the 14 cases that I have seen, today I've got a case which is today morning I had a call which was from a case who's a transgender. So probably this is going to be another challenging case for me to see how we follow this. I'll probably be able to tell you all more about it, but yes, yeah, that's the new branch that we are looking into now.
Okay, there's just one last question by Dr. Saili Kalme. Have you ever had a parent wanting to chest feed the baby and is on hormonal treatment as well, being a genetic male but wants to be identified as female?
No,
So I know these are all complex situations.
So,
yeah,
can I just answer this? Yeah.
yeah,
Dr. Saidi, see, if you, that is why I mentioned this, read the ABM protocol, because there they have discussed each and every different type of scenario. So there are, whatever is the sexual orientation or whatever is the gender identity that a person has, if they have undergone any gender affirming surgery, whereas their sexual, organs have been changed due to some reason, or they are under hormonal treatment to suppress, like this person would be suppressing the testosterone so that the female characteristics become more obvious. So how do you induce lactation in each of these different types of cases? So all that is mentioned very briefly, but it gives you an idea how to proceed with such cases when an actual case would come to you. So just I would urge everyone to read that, the ABM protocol 33.
Yeah, I have also heard about cases when I was in USA, where like in San Diego I was talking about the gay couple. They adopted a baby and both of them wanted to chest feed. And
yes,
that is where, see, mammary glands are present in males also, only thing they are not developed. Like adolescents, you might find some breast enlargement up to even 1 inch or 1.5 inches. So, and you have a story of witch's milk, which is seen in the newborn period. So, in males, if given here in the case, with this case, I think both were females. So they didn't have to be given anything for breast development or development of mammary gland.
This
But
was the first case we were presenting, so we took a simple one.
yeah, no problem. So both the males, the mammary glands are developed, and then they start secreting milk also, and there is a supplemental lactation system which are also used on them, even if they are not able to produce the milk. So both of them get a feeling that they are taking care of the baby. Anyway, I think excellent presentation, not from the point of view of the case you selected and the newness of the case, but the clear diction and the clear presentation, the clarity, the flow of thoughts and the arrangement was really super. So I appreciate both of you for coming out with such a nice presentation. I think it was the second episode of case presentation we had, and we are finding that case presentations are more popular than the theory topics. So over to Dr. Sangeeta Jadhav, who is Secretary of BPNI Maharashtra, for vote of thanks. Dr. Sangeeta Jadhav, are you there?
She is there. She said she would
Yes, she
speak.
was here right now.
Yeah, she's there. I can see her.
Sangeeta, unmute your mic and speak. Dr. Sangeeta Jadhav, I'm talking about Sangeeta Jadhav.
Yeah.
Arey,
I think she's unable to.
connect.
Yeah, she's
Okay.
unable to
So
unmute.
I can see Dr. Alka Gute, who is also a committee member. So Dr. Alka Gute, can you just give vote of thanks?
Okay. Actually, it's such a wonderful session. For the first time, we heard such type of lecture. That's why I mentioned my comment that in the coming years, there will be more such cases because there is a Supreme Court judgment
I think vote of thanks seems to be
I think
unfortunate today.
no. So
but still
So
it is not implemented, and there are a lot of discussions by pro and against it's implemented. There will be challenge will be getting married officially. And am I audible? Am
yes,
I
yes,
audible?
yes,
absolutely. Yes.
yes.
Okay. So thank you, Dr. Manisha and Dr. Riddhi, for such wonderful session. For the first time, we discuss on such a very sensitive issue, I should say. It's not
Yes.
easy job to lactate such a mother or to suppress some like hormones and then give just opposite character to that particular couple or the lady or the male, of course. Prashant was saying just now, we learned this case during this discussion during embryology classes. I still remember our classes when in gynecology, how the differentiation takes place, the ridge dissolves, when there's a female dominance first, but it depends upon whether the male is revealed or not. Otherwise, female will be always there. All these things. So wonderful information given by Prashant as well. And I must appreciate Riddhi especially because she had a courage to treat such patient and she overcome the challenge. That's very important. Dr. Manisha is boss, of course. She can handle any situation. I must congratulate Dr. Riddhi for the
Thank you.
wonderful management of the case and of course my friend Manisha. So thank you once again, Dr. Sushma Malik Madam, President
My
BPNI,
pleasure.
for
You
regular.
don't have to thank our team members.
Yeah.
And of
Yes,
course,
but because
we must thank Mr. Abhijit Kusre, who is managing all these eco sessions for us. And with all our leaves and everything is still adjusting to that particular flow. And after 14 days, we probably having a bigger seminar, but that still is not confirmed. And of course, UNICEF, which has been providing this platform consistently, the Nutrition Bureau, and all of you, of course, for joining these sessions. But again, I find that the attendance has been dropping from the first time when we had more than 200 people. And so we need to find out what is making the people attend lesser and lesser. And I close, but before I close, we have Dr. Sangeeta Jadhav there. So, Sangeeta, would you like to say something? Unmute
Yes, sir.
yourself and speak. Ah.
Yeah. It was nice, excellent session and very different, unique topic, and it was eye opener for many of attendees. And I would like to thank you that IBCLC degree for that. Because of this, we came across such a different, unique topic. Otherwise, we were doing this lactation counseling, everything right from more than now 25 years, 30 years, BPNI Maharashtra. But this IBCLC degree gave us this special opportunity to deal with each and every kind of
Topic.
patient coming across. And
Challenges.
actually,
Yes.
because of that, we can help such patients. So I would like to thank Riddhi. Of course, she is very brilliant and sincere under guidance of Manisha.
Yes.
So thank you, Manisha, for connecting Riddhi to BPNI Maharashtra. And thank you each and
I
everyone.
think we should
It
also
was
forget
such a
Vyoma
nice
Dalal.
case. Yeah.
We should not forget Vyoma Dalal, which is nutrition officer at UNICEF.
Yeah.
She has been involved in,
Right.
back on the backstage. And also Shalini Kotamkar, who has been coordinating between BPNI and
True.
the UNICEF. So, and
Yes.
of course, Nutrition Bureau, because she is there in Nutrition Bureau. So there are
Because
many,
of them, we could
yeah.
actually involve lot of people in this platform, and many of people who want to listen, attend such educate and attend the CMEs, they could attend because of them. So we are really thankful for them, and looking forward for such many more CMEs. And as sir said, we have to see the attendance. This time maybe it was a festival time, but otherwise it
I will
should
tell you
be.
what the problem is. That
And
since we are expecting a wider crowd to come, when you say something like LGBTQ, half the grassroots people are out. And then we say something like simple as initiation of breastfeeding, half the crowd which is lactation concerned, अरे ये क्या सुनने का, ये तो रोज का ही topic है initiation. So to be balancing between the two types of crowds, which also happens for language, how language we conducted. Anyway, so I request all of you to
but at
participate.
the same time, sir, I would like to announce the same. Sir, I would like to announce, because some people genuinely they might be missing this. So as you put this on the BPNI Maharashtra YouTube channel, so those who missed it can attend and revise. Even they can content or something like that, so they can undergo same session again on the YouTube, and they can share that YouTube link to others also.
Okay. I would like to appeal to all of you that please come forward with cases for case presentation. Come with some new interesting topics. If people don't come forward, we will not be, let me be very frank with you, we will not be able to continue sessions for a long time. So the appeal with this particular appeal, and promise to meet you again on 18th of 18th, yeah, 18th of this month, same timing, maybe some extended timing if it is a big project, because Nutrition Saptah, Nutrition Maha is starting on 12th or 13th. So bye bye till then, and see you on 18th. Thank you so much. Thanks.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
Thank
Thank you
you.
so
And
much.
thank you, Riddhi and Manisha, for the awesome work done.
Thank you. Thank you.
Congratulations.
Thank you all. Hmm. मॅडम वोटिंग केलं का?